Well, friends, a largely compromised Supreme Court just did Donald Trump a solid. And in the process, potentially did some real damage to our democracy. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, as I'm sure you know by now, the Supreme Court just did an enormous favor for Donald Trump at the expense of the American people, because the Supreme Court has said they're going to take up this absurd claim by Donald Trump that he has absolute presidential immunity. He can commit all the crimes he wants while in office against the American people. He can order the assassination of his political opponents with complete impunity against prosecution. The Supreme Court said, we've thought about it a good long while, and yes, we're going to take that issue up on appeal. But the Supreme Court said, you know what? We'll get around to hearing oral arguments in the case in about 2 months. And after that, there's no telling how long it will take for us to decide the issue. Could be weeks later, could be months later. So at this point, friends, there's no telling if Judge Tanya Chutkan, who's presiding over Donald Trump's criminal prosecution in Washington, D.C. for trying to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election, trying to unlawfully and unconstitutionally retain the power of the presidency. There's no telling if Judge Chutkan will get that case back in time to have it tried before the November presidential election, such that the American voters will get to know whether, in the event Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, whether they're voting for a convicted felon who tried to criminally overturn a presidential election, or whether they're voting for a fully exonerated man, somebody found not guilty by a jury of his peers, fully cleared of all wrongdoing, innocent of all charges. Seems like information the American voters need and deserve to have before November. The Supreme Court apparently feels otherwise. Let's start with the new reporting. This from Politico. Headline, how the Supreme Court just threw Trump's 2024 trial schedule into turmoil. Or I have an alternate title for the article, how the Supreme Court casually sold American democracy down the river. That article begins, as voters cast ballots this fall to decide whether Donald Trump should win another presidential election, a federal jury may be weighing whether he attempted to steal the last one. That's one of the plausible outcomes of Wednesday's decision by the Supreme Court to take up Trump's claim that he's immune from prosecution for his efforts to subvert the 2020 election. In fact, by taking up the immunity question and keeping the case on hold in the meantime, the judges have all but guaranteed that Trump cannot stand trial on the federal election charges until the waning weeks of campaign season at the earliest. If that happens, Trump may have to juggle courtroom appearances with debates and swing state speeches. The trial, which is expected to last several months, could even overlap with Election Day itself. The justice's 200-word unsigned order made no sweeping pronouncements, but it nevertheless scrambled Special Counsel Jack Smith's determined, if unspoken, effort to bring Trump to trial before the election. Here's a look at the fallout. Trial stays on ice, won't be defrosted for months. Pretrial proceedings in the Washington, D.C.-based federal election case, in which Trump is charged with conspiring to deprive the Americans of their right to vote, have been stalled since December 7, while he, Trump, has litigated his novel presidential immunity claim. Trump contends that his attempts to overturn Joe Biden's victory were part of his official duties as president and cannot be the basis for criminal charges. Lower courts have resoundingly rejected the immunity claim, and many legal experts expect the Supreme Court to ultimately reject it as well. But by setting arguments for late April and keeping the case on ice in the meantime, the justices virtually ensured that the trial, which was originally scheduled to begin March 4th, cannot begin until late summer or fall. And friends, let's take a quick look at the Supreme Court's one-page grant of review in the case, what's called the grant of certiorari. They've granted review on the following question: whether, and if so, to what extent, does a former president enjoy presidential immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts during his tenure in office? And the Supreme Court said that they'll set oral argument, during the week of April 22nd, 2024. So friends, at this point, I really just want to talk about one thing, one aspect of this democracy-damaging development. And I want to stick to just this one point because it's taken me about 24 hours to kind of bring my blood pressure back down. And it's not back down all the way yet. But here's what I want to focus on. Here's what I hope we can all focus on together. The rule of law is not going to save us. The rule of law didn't save us in 2020. Donald Trump committed any number of crimes while he was President of the United States. For openers, he bribed and extorted President Zelensky, withholding congressional funds because he wanted a favor, though, from President Zelensky. He wanted Zelensky to announce a false investigation against his political rival, just throwing fictitious dirt into the mix so it would work to Donald Trump's political advantage. A novice prosecutor could take the evidence, walk into court, and prove in his or her sleep that Donald Trump committed the crimes of bribery and extortion of President Zelensky, and the rule of law did not step in to address it. Donald Trump committed countless crimes of obstructing congressional proceedings during the course of his presidency, telling his executive branch officials do not comply with lawfully issued congressional subpoenas. That was not Donald Trump saying, we're going to oppose congressional subpoenas on a matter of principle and move this issue into the courts so the courts can resolve whether my executive branch officials should be required to comply with them. No, he just acted like a mob boss and told his executive branch officials, do not comply with the law. Do not comply with congressional subpoenas. That's the crime of obstructing Congress. Donald Trump was writing reimbursement checks out of the Oval Office to pay back Michael Cohen as part of the hush money scheme, the falsifying business records in New York for his criminal conspiracy of trying to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. Fortunately, friends, New York has indicted him, and Donald Trump is about to be tried and convicted for those crimes. But the rule of law did not step in and help us or save us in 2020. Donald Trump committed as many as 10 counts, felony counts, of obstruction of justice, as meticulously documented by Bob Mueller in Volume 2 of the Trump-Russia report, for which Bob Mueller testified Donald Trump could be prosecuted the day he leaves office, and the rule of law didn't step in, didn't address it, didn't save us. The rule of law didn't save us in 2020, and the rule of law will not save us this time around. The courts won't save us. The judiciary won't save us. The Department of Justice won't save us. You know who will save us? We will save us. The people, the voters. Just as we did in 2020. It's the voters that saved American democracy by voting Donald Trump out of office in 2020, and we're going to do it again in 2024, and we're going to do it in even bigger numbers, by far. The voters, we will save us, not the rule of law, not the institutions of government, not Congress, not the Department of Justice, not the executive branch, not the courts, not the judges, not the prosecutors. We will save us. We did it before, we'll do it again. We have to do it again because the Supreme Court has just stepped in and threw up a roadblock for reasons that we will have to work through in the future. I have some thoughts about why. Because they could have issued an order, this one-page grant of review that said, we're going to hear this case in the next 2 weeks. We're going to decide it. A week or two after that, we're going to give it back to Judge Chutkan, and she can put it back on the trial track, and this case can get tried and resolved well in advance of the November election. But that's not what the Supreme Court has done. They've set the whole thing up for failure. I have an idea why, as the blood pressure goes back up, but we're going to save that for the next video. But right now, folks, people are feeling depressed and angry and despondent, right? And frustrated and helpless. Turn all of that into energy and determination. We saved us in 2020. We will save us. The American people, the American voters, will save the day again in 2024. Joe Biden won by 7 million votes. Last time, he'll win by 14 million votes, or probably more this time. Let this energize us. The rule of law won't save us, but we will save us. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.